Right, so we're getting ready to fit the clutch lifting mechanism, opening mechanism, into the housing here. So, and that's the clutch pull rod that goes right the way through to the clutch. So the first thing is we've got this sort of back plate with these strange tear-shaped grooves in it, and that will sit here in the housing. You can see the little, probably see the little peg there, and that peg goes in that groove there. Then we have 3 ball bearings, and the ball bearings fit in these strange grooves. Okay, like that. And then we've got the sort of outer plate with the same grooves in it, and so that outer plate will then go on like on the inner plate. And because it's got these strange grooves that get shallower and shallower, the idea is that as you turn this, and the ball bearings run up the shallower ramps, it forces, as this turns, it's forced outwards. I'm making it look good. It's forced outwards like that, yeah, because the ball bearings push it upwards. In reality, it moves about like, half a millimetre, but never mind. That's forced outwards, and then that is then connected to the pull rod with this nut which sits in there, and so then this pulls out, and that then pulls out the pull rod, and allegedly we have clutch disengagement if we're at all lucky. Then there's a lock nut which goes on the end of the pull rod to stop the thing coming out of adjustment, and then there's this strange two-pronged spring affair which bolts in here, and these little sort of springs here, they sit, you can see where they've worn on this outer plate to hold it in place. To be honest, I'm probably going to leave this off, because I left it off the last rebuild I did and it made no difference whatsoever, because of course this is already held in place by this giant nut. So the only sort of purpose it seems to serve at the moment is to make the clutch even stronger. Not by much, but it's just another little thing that you've got to push against these springs to open the clutch. So if it works without it, then leave it out, which is what I'm going to do this time. So that's what we're going to do bit by bit. I'll put that plate in. There we go. And put that plate in. And then get some grease, blobs of grease in these grooves, and stick the ball bearings in, because of course this is going to be vertical when we put it in the engine. And then put this on, hopefully without losing the ball bearing. Then we'll put the adjusting nut on and the lock nut, and then we'll adjust the thing up. But it might have to come apart to fit the cable later on, because they're difficult to fit, so it's probably got to come apart anyway to fit the cable. And we haven't got the cable, so I can't do that now. But we'll adjust it up anyway, but I'm just saying it's probably got to be taken apart to fit the cable later. Right, let's get on with that. Okie dokie. So I've got my back plate. I'm going to put some dobs of grease on those tracks, which are going to hold the ball bearings in place in a minute. There we go. I'm going to put this back there, and it literally just pushes in. I think I'm right in saying one thing to note is I think the very early bikes, this was a slightly different plate in a different position, and I think they changed it. I think this plate, I think I'm right in saying that this plate on later bikes like this, it's in a different position. So if you've got an early bike, it's worth just changing that plate for a later one. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the situation. Right, then I'm going to put the glue the ball bearings in place with the grease, hopefully. Okay, and then I'm going to get a thin screwdriver. That one should be okay. So it's thin enough for me to get the screwdriver through this nut and into the end of the pull rod, because I'm going to put this on now. The trouble is that when we put the nut on, the nut will almost certainly try and turn the pull rod rather than screwing on, especially because this thread is often been a bit abused over the years by people adjusting it. There we go, get it in roughly the right position, which is with the arm down near this stop here. Are we on there? I'm not sure. I'm going to take that back off, I'm not happy. That's in there, that's in there, that's in there. There we go. Yeah, okay. Then with our three hands, which is really what we need, we hold that in place and put the nut on. But as I say, the trouble is this nut on, this nut is going on nicely. Oh yeah. What normally happens is this pull rod starts spinning as you put the nut on. So then you've got to have a screwdriver to hold that to stop it spinning, and do the nut up and hold this in place to stop the ball bearings falling out, like now. But this one's being nice and ball. Only now is that pull rod beginning to turn. So what I'm going to do is now I can hold the nut and actually screw the pull rod out, which has the same effect as screwing the nut in, if you know what I mean. There we go. All right, okay. Now, this is how we adjust the clutch by screwing this nut in and out. What I'm actually doing is screwing the pull rod and holding the nut, which has the same effect. Now, in the manual it says there should be a 5 thou gap behind this nut and the mechanism, you know, basically to stop tension. But of course, if you have a 5 thou gap, I mean, that's probably less than 5 thou gap, I don't know. But already, you know, we've lost a lot of the action is already used up just in the play. So then people say, well, actually, I just use 2 thou gap. And so I'm sort of radical and I say, no, I use no thou gap. Don't tell anybody. I just use it so it's just, you know, it doesn't matter that, because this nut will turn with the mechanism, that's fine. But you see, if you have it over tightened, then the pull rod is pulling on that bearing all the time. If you over tighten this, you're pulling the bearing, you're pulling the pull rod. And so that bearing is taking load, that bearing in the clutch is taking load all the time. But we have uprated that bearing, have we not? Yes, we have, to a bearing that is designed to take sideways play. So it doesn't matter that much, in my opinion, that we're taking up that play. But then, of course, there are also bearings on the clutch spider, you know, just behind the casing, that radial needle roller bearing, and of course they'll be putting tension on that as well. So it's a balancing act. But I do it so it's just, you know, there's no play. It's not tight. It's not you know, I'm not doing it so that the pull rod is pulling against, but just so there's no play, or, you know, the merest of play, because that gives you maximum lift. Basically, that's why we do it. But you know, you've got to be careful that you don't damage the components. Then there's a lock nut that goes on to simply make sure that our adjustment stays where we put it. Yeah. And then we have to do that lock nut up. So hold the big nut and just do that up. Yeah, that's not bad. See, I've got some, it's turning that, so it's not tight. but there's no real play, and so that's how I adjust the clutch. So it's just, it's not tight, so it's not wearing that needle roller bearing, but we've got a maximum lift we can, maximum adjustment on the mechanism. And then it could be, if we're lucky, we get that cable, the clutch cable in, but often it's easier to take this mechanism off, put the clutch, because they're a bit of a bugger to thread the nipple through the mechanism there. But that's what you want. You want that as close to there as you can, because that means we've got, let's have a look. Yeah, you see what we got. I'm lifting that, and even now, you see, just having done it a couple of times, it's already, I've already got extra play. So I'm going to, just by bedding in a bit. So I'm going to just readjust it now. Have a look, see what we got. Yeah, we're just that little bit loose, and so it's just giving us that. Obviously, there's always going to be a bit of play there, but I want to get as minimum as I can. So I'm going to mess about with it a bit, and so that this nut is still turning, but there's absolutely no sort of free play. That's how I adjust it anyway. Ta-da! And there we have the primary chain case finished in all its glory, that machine polished. Hey, if you like, bling, I like a bit of bling myself. Up to you, but you want it really nice. You get a machine polish. You can polish them by hand, but basically the chrome plate of the metal finishers, they do all my chrome polishing as well as my chrome plating, and that's what it comes up as. So we're all done. Fantastic. Unfortunately, I don't have the cover, that mechanism cover, which should obviously make the whole thing look an awful lot nicer. But the engine came without that cover, so we haven't got that. But there you go, done. So we're on to about the last job now, which will be fitting the ignition, electronic ignition. Just by the by, some people say, oh, I took this cover off, the cover that's missing, and there was a bit of oil in there. Is there supposed to be oil in there? Well, the answer is yes. Oil is designed, it comes through from behind the mechanism, but only a little bit of oil. And then if you see, there is actually a little drain hole at the bottom. So there is supposed to be oil gets in there, which is just enough to lubricate this mechanism, keep everything working. You shouldn't have a huge amount of oil, but if you take the cover off and there's a little bit of oil in the bottom, that's fine, because it's supposed to have that little bit of oil. Okay, yeah. So onwards and upwards. Primary chain case done.